Good morning. Welcome to Counterpoints. How you doing, Emily?
I'm great. You just got back from a big trip. You might be a little jet lagged.
I'm feeling good now. Yeah, I was in Doha for some reporting and for a conference. I'd never been to Doha before. Kind of exciting to see that. There are some of the roads down by the sea that are basically paved with the marble that we would use for our, if you're rich here, you put in your kitchen. They're paving their roads with it. They're doing well in Doha.
Another level of rich.
They are.
Really.
They're another level.
But are they rich enough for Ghost Energy?
I'm sure some of them are. It also puts the inequality that all wealth rests on, like, right in your face, because you have all these guest workers everywhere. And here you talk to your Uber drivers, and it's kind of like normal people with normal families here in the U.S. Over there, it's like, oh yeah, I haven't been back to Sri Lanka for 2 years to see my family, and I make
pennies,
$500 a month, and send it all back.
Right.
It's like absolutely there are so many people across this world living just the most difficult lives, and those are the people lucky enough to get those jobs. Right. Which is it's a reminder of just what an ugly world we've developed.
And we will be talking about some drop site reporting actually later in the show. We're going to start with obviously breaking news as it relates to Tel Aviv. This is just breaking after we had prepped most of the show, so we're going to get to that in a moment. Updates on Lebanon. There is a truly remarkable Rashida Tlaib block. Rashida Tlaib kind of versus CNN, or versus the world, even you could say, that we're going to get to just after we do some updates from the conflict itself. Kamala Harris and the filibuster, a saga that started in 2022, actually. Probably, I'm sure she commented on it before, but Joe Manchin has now said he will not endorse Kamala Harris because she told a radio station yesterday she wants to get rid of that filibuster.
There goes West Virginia. She had such high hopes.
All those West Virginia voters going to the polls and voting to preserve the filibuster.
Joe Manchin himself didn't run in West Virginia because he was going to get crushed. So, not sure what his endorsement would have meant. But anyway, yes, Kyrsten Sinema also not happy. And then we'll be talking about this lawsuit that the Department of Justice filed against Visa, which is excellent and awesome. It actually comes after Trump was piggybacking off of Bernie Sanders again, saying that he's going to cap interest rates at 10%. We'll talk about why they filed this lawsuit and what it might mean if they actually succeed for prices and for people who use debit cards, which is basically all people. And then what do we got? Oh,
Marcellus Williams.
Yes. There was an execution in Missouri of, and I'll give him his real name, Khalifa Ibn Rayford Daniels. He converted while in prison, executed last night, despite the fact that the family asked for clemency.
The victim's family.
The victim's family asked for clemency. There are significant doubts about his conviction. The jury only included one black member after the prosecutor later admitted striking people because of their race, effectively. And the prosecutor's office that originally prosecuted him wanted him to get clemency. Instead, he's dead.
Yeah. So we will break down all of the details and even talk about the larger trend, because I think just this month there's a host of executions that are scheduled to take place. That is
a whole bunch in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's the pace is pretty high in the next couple of weeks. So we'll talk about all of that. Let's start on another bleak topic, which is we're going to be beginning with Tel Aviv. Ryan, breaking news out of Tel Aviv, where Israel says that it intercepted a missile that was heading for Tel Aviv. Now, what we're hearing is that apparently that was the story from Hezbollah, is that it was intended for a Mossad headquarters. Is that right?
Yeah, the Mossad headquarters in the suburbs of Tel Aviv, which, if this were a newscast about an assault on Gaza or on Lebanon, the newscaster would immediately say that Israel is keeping its military and intelligence infrastructure in civilian areas to hide behind human shields. And when we see the reverse, we see how clear it is that doesn't make it okay to bomb a suburb. For some reason, the American public is swayed by that argument when it comes to, say, Gaza or Lebanon or anywhere else. Say, oh well, it was in a suburb. Well, I guess that's a real shame that they had to level all those apartment buildings and that entire civilian area or that hospital. They found a couple weapons.
I was going to say, people conflate those two things. The idea of, as in this case, having Mossad headquarters in the suburbs, which is the same with the CIA, for example. A lot of those intelligence agencies are out in the suburbs here. But
they might bomb Costco here if they're aiming for the Pentagon.
And no casualties reported so far in this case, but people will conflate having in a densely populated area like Gaza infrastructure that's near military infrastructure with people when they're literally hiding like bombs under children's beds. Those two things are not the same.
And another difference would be the actual firing of the missiles.
Right.
Some Hamas or PIJ will fire missiles from very nearby, like a school or a mosque or something else. But again, that's related less to, I think, morality and more to just the massive asymmetry. Like Israel has the U.S. sending, fighter jets and endless amounts of bombs and missiles, and has the capacity to just launch from the air. When they go about building their infrastructure, they build their military infrastructure right into Tel Aviv.
So again, no casualties reported so far in the situation. The death toll, according to the Associated Press, since Monday in Lebanon is 564 people. That's 50 children and 94 women, according to Lebanese authorities. So there's been also attacks from Hezbollah in northern Israel. A couple of people in a kibbutz.
Some of the VO here of the.
This is Beirut,
the carnage, right? Yeah. Well, this is southern Lebanon. Yeah.
Southern Lebanon. Okay, and there was reports of people getting hit by shrapnel in a kibbutz in northern Israel. What you're seeing on your screen right now, Ryan, this is southern Lebanon, utter destruction.
Yeah, and this is a man who was going back to try to get to his wife. Here's some other attacks that you're seeing across Lebanon. I think it's worth kind of setting up some of the context here for people who have been, focused, mostly on the Israel-Gaza war and also the attack on the West Bank. So, very, very brief history of Hezbollah. Like, they emerged as a result of the 1982 invasion of Lebanon by Israel, and they formed into a guerrilla group to expel Israel, and actually finally succeeded in doing so in 2000, and kind of became heroes of resistance around the region as a result of it, and then began to embed themselves into the body politic of Lebanon, which is a very ailing and kind of psychotic body. Like, it's just a complete Lebanon as a state is a complete mess. In 2006, they launched a little cross-border raid and grabbed a couple of Israeli soldiers. And Israel then launched a massive all-out bombing campaign and ground invasion into Lebanon, which turned out to be a failure. Did not get the hostages back, and also withdrew, which again kind of raising the celebrity status in the region of Hezbollah. But then in the 2010s, there was the Syria civil war, and Hezbollah sided with Bashar al-Assad. Now you can imagine why they would do that, because they are allies with Iran. Iran is allies with Syria. And so if Hezbollah is a client of Iran and Iran's got business, Hezbollah is going to carry out that business. But that meant that they were fighting with a lot of kind of Sunni rebels in Syria and killing a lot of Muslims. And that very much tarnished their reputation and led to a break between Hamas and Hezbollah. Like, they became adversaries. They were on the other side of this. Hamas was supportive of the uprising in Syria, but since then, a little bit before October 7th, Hamas and Hezbollah had a détente and became allies again. And so, right after October 7th, when the rubber hit the road with the war between Israel and Hamas, Hezbollah immediately starts launching rockets, which sends 60,000, roughly, Israelis from the north scattering, displaced back towards Tel Aviv and elsewhere. That is what is driving the political pressure to now go to war with Lebanon, to try to get those 60,000 people back into their homes who've been displaced for that long. And imagine how much pressure that puts on Israel at 60,000 people. Gaza's 2 million people have been displaced for 11 months. And so in the same way that the Houthis were facing domestic problems and regional problems because of the civil war there, were able to politically overcome those by challenging Israel. Hezbollah, too, is able to overcome its problems that it had in the region by challenging Israel. It's the oldest story in politics. You got problems at home, you find an adversary somewhere else that people hate more, and everybody rallies around the flag. And so it is in the kind of domestic political interests of all of these actors, whether it's the Houthis, Iraqi Shia militias, Hezbollah, to challenge Israel, and because it makes them look like they're standing up for Gaza, which they are.
Right.
And what Nasrallah keeps saying, the head of Hezbollah, and the Houthis as well, we are not ending this until the war on Gaza ends.
This was going to be my big question for you with all of that context, because the massive open question is, does this escalate? And that's been the fear since violence broke out on October 7th. I mean, where do you see this going where do you see this going in terms of how it can pour even more sort of gas on this fire? If it's good, if it's in the interest of Hezbollah politically to escalate, does Hezbollah escalate? Are there external pressures? A lot of people would say there. So the argument from like the neoconservative camp would be that Iran is orchestrating all of this. They're puppets, or they're like sort of chess pieces in Iran's game versus the West. So it's not necessarily what Hezbollah wants. It'll be what Iran wants. How do you respond to that?
So I don't think it's one point on that. Iran has major influence over Hezbollah. U.S. has major influence over Israel. Both Israel and Hezbollah have their own agency as well, though, from their kind of superpower.
And their own political motivations.
Because Iran's not a superpower, but a bigger power. Sure. And their own political motivations. But I don't think it's in their interest to escalate. I think it's in their interest to look like they're putting up a strong resistance and continuing to put pressure on Israel to end its genocidal campaign in Gaza. Like, I think that's what works for them. They think, and Iran and Hezbollah have been very clear in kind of the signals that they've been sending and that their proxies have been putting out, that they believe Netanyahu wants a regional war to bail himself out. That Netanyahu's kind of stuck in a cul-de-sac of his own making, and wants to just flip the table and see what happens on the other side. Like, it's not even necessarily a strategy, but it's a strategy to blow things up and live to see another day. And both Iran and Hezbollah think, if that is the thing that our adversary wants, let's do everything we can to avoid giving him that. Which is exactly what I and some other people were saying right after October 7th, that it was like, Hamas launched this attack very clearly as a provocation to bring about an overreaction that would then discredit you.
On the world stage.
On the world stage.
And the US.
And hurt your economy and flip the table and just see what happens, upset the status quo. So if you're Israel, be smart, don't give them that. But they couldn't help themselves. So there are some who think that Hezbollah has been so thoroughly degraded by the intelligence infiltration, basically. So it's interesting how in Gaza, Hamas has obviously been completely shellacked. But Israel had to do it by destroying the entire area, and then laying waste to Hamas.
Lives to see another day as an organization.
Exactly, but they have not been able to. But they've been able to inflict a lot more damage, a lot more quickly on Hezbollah. I think some of that has to do with how, because Gaza is such a closed-off society, like literally physically closed off, and Israel has much less intelligence.
Let's actually put
penetration.
Let's put these up on the screen. So this is A2. This is a map of where you can see the latest death toll, and look at the concentration there in southern Lebanon. If you're listening to this, a massive cluster of dots in southern Lebanon from the border with northern Israel. We also, though, Ryan, this is, I think, sort of along the lines of what you were just talking to. If we put A3 up on the screen, this is a map. Explain what we're seeing here and how it relates to everything you were just mentioning.
Yeah. So this is. This is a map that basically Israel putting out, saying, like,
it's in Hebrew.
And I put it for the next one. I think we have the translation, and a bit of a translation in the next one. Basically, what they're saying is that what I said earlier, that Lebanon is a mess of a state. So this is Amichai Shikli, Israeli Minister of Diaspora and Combating Anti-Semitism, minister in the government, saying basically Lebanon is not a real government, not a real state. It was, drawn by colonialists. He talks about Sykes-Picot. It's like the amount of projection and like irony in it is overwhelming. But he says this isn't a real state. These borders aren't real, and by having these Lebanese civilians down here by this green line, it makes it more difficult for our people who live in villages up to the north to live there safely. So basically what they're saying is we need to push these Lebanese folks way up higher.
Not a country.
Right? And it's not a country anyway, so we can just redraw it. Like he says, the country actually, a country's borders ought to be drawn by natural boundaries and power politics. Which, okay, I guess that is how it's always been done. We're just kind of used to it being stable over the last 100 years or so. What they're implying there is that they're going to, run a campaign of ethnic cleansing and clear it out of people, so that they can repopulate northern areas. I mean, that has been a long time goal of what's called Greater Israel. But they've been able to infiltrate Hezbollah in a way that has allowed them to kill an enormous number of senior officials and middlemen. The pager attack, it sounds like it maimed something like 1,400 or 1,500 people. It's a fighting force of about 40 to 50,000, but its communications had been disrupted by all of the assassinations. They moved from cell phones over to pagers. Then the pagers start exploding. So, it's an open question about how much damage has been wreaked. And so there are some people who are saying that the lack of a huge response so far is strategic and that it is related to Iran and Hezbollah not wanting to give Israel this all-out war. There are others who are saying they've really received a massive blow, and that they don't even have the capacity, and that its supporters are kind of covering up the fact that they've received this major blow by pointing to a strategic pause, like, hold me back, hold me back.
Mm-hmm. And before we get to this new drop site report that is chilling, could you walk us through what ProPublica found in the investigation about Gaza yesterday? This was released yesterday, I believe, as well. This is A4. We can put this up on the screen.
Yeah, so interesting piece here. So ProPublica's investigation, Israel deliberetely blocked humanitarian aid to Gaza. 2 government bodies concluded. Anthony Blinken rejected them. So on the one hand, we reported here at the time based on Akbar Ahmed at HuffPost and actually DevEx, which does some great reporting on USAID, and it's like a trade pub that focuses on development around the world, had reported that of the 3 agencies within the State Department that were asked to sign off on whether or not Israel was restricting humanitarian aid, 2 of them said that they were restricting the aid. That was their assessment on the ground, that Israel was blocking aid from getting in. The legal consequences of that was under this provision called 620I. We can't give military funding to a state actor that is at the same time blocking our own humanitarian aid from getting to the people we're trying to send it to. Pretty reasonable law. Kind of funny that we even had to put that into law. It's so common sense. Like we're not, no, of course we're not supporting somebody who's actively our adversary in attempting to get humanitarian aid. Turns out we would do that. And so the State Department, or Blinken at least, had to figure out a way to affirm to Congress that this law was not being broken. And his problem was that his people inside the State Department were telling him that the law was being broken. And what ProPublica does have that hadn't been reported before is this fascinating email exchange at the very end of its article. So if you read that piece, just scroll to the very end and it's very strange. Like their last 6 paragraphs are like awesome. The rest of it is like, we knew all this already. But go to the last 6 paragraphs and read those. But basically what happens is the top State Department official who really is in charge of moving the money, moving American tax dollars to Israel so Israel can send them back to us for weapons, is telling the general counsel of the State Department, we really need to move this money. Like Israel has bills to pay, which is also absurd. They're not paying their own bills. We're paying the bills. We're just moving it over there and moving it back. Hope we're not paying banking fees to Visa though, or Western Union the entire time.
That should be the next drop site investigation.
Yeah,
honestly,
we're gonna find out,
that is a big question.
Who are the banks that are just like siphoning fees as we send money to Israel and Israel sends them back to Rosalind?
Right.
For the weapons. But so anyway, they're like, look, they got bills to pay. We need to move this money over there. But the general counsel's like, ooh, but we still don't have approval yet because there's still questions about whether they're blocking humanitarian aid. So there's this email chain, and a top bureaucrat writes back, a woman named Noyes, I forget her first name. She writes back, it's our assessment that they are, in fact, still blocking humanitarian aid. And so the GC is like, so are you saying that they're in violation of 620I?
Right.
And she's like, yep, that is our assessment. So it's like, boom, okay, done. You cannot send the money then. They take it offline, as ProPublica reports. The woman has a couple meetings with senior officials, and she decides that, you know what, Israel really is doing not everything that we'd like them to do, but they're really trying and they're making commitments.
Sure.
They're saying things.
And it is true that the situation is difficult.
It's true they said things.
And it's true the situation is difficult. It's true that there are legitimate problems with getting the aid to the right people in a war zone.
True, but as USAID in its report, in its private report that has since surfaced, they have examples of aid workers who Israel gives permission to evacuate along a certain route that they then run into an Israeli checkpoint, get stopped.
Yeah.
And they're like, we have been approved to move through here. They're like, nope, sorry, go back. They go back, IDF opens fire on them and kills them. So USAID is like, okay, maybe there are some challenges here to what we're doing here, but what they're doing is malicious, and they didn't use the word genocidal, but what they're doing is far beyond what is necessary. And
how do you read the Blinken politics into this?
That Blinken was clearly always just going to sign off on this, and I guess fortunately for Blinken, a decent number of State Department officials have resigned in protest over this policy. So now he doesn't have to worry about them either. He can just the only time that humanitarian aid ticked up a little bit was after that World Central Kitchen massacre.
Yeah.
And Biden had to get on the phone with Netanyahu and say, you need to do better. And for several days, things were better. And then they went back to normal.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.